Hello, my name is Jennifer Ellis and I'm chair of the Solo and Small Firm section of the Pennsylvania Bar Association. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Ellen Friedman, the Law Practice Management Coordinator of the PBA. Ellen is a free service available to members of the PBA and she has extraordinary knowledge related to law practice management. Don't hesitate to call on her.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ellen Friedman, Law Practice Manager for the Pennsylvania Bar Association, and I'm pleased to be with you right now to give you one of my little droplets of wisdom. We're going to talk for just a few minutes about a very tiny thing related to managing our receivables. Lawyers typically hate managing their receivables. You avoid it at all costs. And what you don't realize is that there are emotional reasons, very valid emotional reasons, why you don't want to deal with it. And I want to talk to you. I want to talk about some of the most prevalent emotional reasons that stop you, because putting them up on the table, recognizing them, and admitting that they are holding us back is halfway through the battle of dealing with them. So we're going to talk about that, as well as emotional issues for the client that you may not be aware of. So one of the first things that gets in the way of us dealing with our receivables is we're just too darn busy. We have more work to do than we've ever had before. We may be less profitable. We may have fewer clients, but we struggle daily to get the work done. And so if we have a choice between getting work done or chasing old money, what are we going to do? We're always going to give in to the inevitable call of the work that needs to get done and the deadlines that are pressing our buttons. So we're too busy. The other thing that gets in the way is that it's annoying, is it not? We go out of our way to take care of clients. We give up events with our children, family events. We miss the recital. We miss the ball game. We may work the weekend. We may work on holidays for the demands to meet the demands of the client, often because they don't bother to tell us in advance that they have something that's coming up. They figure that you have nothing better to do than to drop everything and deal with what they have at the last minute. And so they should be so grateful for the sacrifices that you continually make to meet their needs satisfied, that they should write you a check the minute the bill arrives. And they don't do that, even though they can afford to do that. And so often they wait until we pick up the phone or send them a letter, whatever, and that is darn annoying. And so a lot of attorneys tell me that they don't deal with it because they're so annoyed that they're afraid they're going to lose control if they actually speak to the client, and they're going to get angry and inappropriate. And that's very, very understandable. Um, Another problem that gets in the way is that it's really unpleasant to make calls about money. We normally refer to it in our mind, even if we don't say it out loud, as collections. And you're thinking, I didn't go to law school to do collections. I'm not comfortable doing collections, and very few people are. In fact, if you ask the majority of people, they'll tell you that they get a knot in the stomach just thinking about getting on the phone and making those types of calls. And typically, calls are more effective than letters. Not many people have those Midas tonsils that I have. I actually am one of the few people that enjoyed making those calls. But for most of you, it's extremely unpleasant. So again, if you have a choice between doing what you like, which is digging into the client work and being creative and doing what you were trained to do, versus making these very unpleasant calls, obviously you're going to want to opt for doing the work and not making the calls. Another thing that impacts us is that we are both the salesperson, although we don't like to use that term in law firms. We like to say we're the rainmakers. But you can't ask a client for more work and simultaneously ask them to pay past due bills. Credit collections and sales are never together. And the corporate world knows that because they, all the way over there, they have the department that deals with the credit and the collections and shutting you off if you haven't paid. And all the way over there, they have the salespeople, and they don't try and cross and do each other's jobs. Both grateful, though, for the other for doing what they do. So when you're sitting in the chair and you're only one in the chair at your law firm, you make a choice. What are you going to do? Go after more work, or are you going to go after past billings? And what most lawyers conclude is, number one, it's more pleasant to go after more work. I don't have a problem with that. And if I keep doing more work, it's going to create more bills and put more pressure on the client. And sooner or later, they're going to have to start paying me. Well, of course, the truth of the matter is that if you're not dealing with the receivable part, then they're perfectly willing to keep spending your dime and your time until you cut them off. And as long as you keep looking for more work and they know they haven't paid you and they know you know that they haven't paid you, they're going to take advantage of that. And so that pressure that you think is going to force them to start paying you, maybe just throwing more good money after bad money, unfortunately for you. Uh, and then last but not least on my list, and of course there's lots more reasons, but these are at the top. The client may actually make you so angry. And I'm not just talking about the unpleasant side where you're afraid you'll lose some control, but actual anger bordering on rage. The client, a lot of clients in certain practice areas, particularly like family law, they expect that you're going to finance their troubles, and they have no problem with making that assumption. And they will come to you for work knowing they won't pay you, can't pay you, and just hope that you don't ask those questions. Well, you also have some that could absolutely afford to pay you upfront, and they just don't, or they cry broke even though they're not broke. They always find fault after the bill goes out, and they want to argue over every penny, hoping you'll walk away from it, or hoping to get an additional discount. And those things make us legitimately angry, particularly if we have had to forego our own payment, to let our bills fall behind, to dip into our line of credit to finance their work. And that makes us legitimately angry. And so we may call up already having lost our emotional control. And that makes us not want to deal with it even more. The good news is you're not the person to probably have to deal with it, but that's another droplet that we'll cover at another time. Now, let me go on to some of the big emotional issues that the clients experience. The first may be, and I know this because I represented in my life before law firms, I managed a number of multi corporate environments with troubled corporations that were in financial trouble. And I know that sometimes, you know, people want to pay their bills, but they're embarrassed because they might go into spending their money, spending your money or getting your if you make widgets, your widgets, with the best intentions of paying, and sometimes things turn around. Somebody didn't pay them, their biggest customer goes under. The market changes. There are a number of reasons why honorable people with every good intention all of a sudden finds themselves in a crunch and is unable to pay. And they are very often just too embarrassed to talk about it with you. If you do not volunteer with them payment schedules and accommodations, if you don't offer them the ability to put it on a credit card or some other things where they don't have to own up to the situation that they're in, then they're going to avoid speaking to you at all costs. And most have a mindset, because of stereotypes that exist about lawyers, that they have to pay you in full or not pay you at all. And so if you're one of those attorneys that bills infrequently and sends bigger bills, you're just making it more difficult for them. So you need to let them know. First of all, you need to bill them more frequently. That's again another droplet that we'll talk about at another time. But you need to let them know it's okay to send me $50 at a time or $100 at a time, or they'll just keep putting you off because they can't seem to get enough money gathered to discharge the entire bill. Another thing that happens with clients, and this is going to surprise you, but you unknowingly convey to the client the message that it's not important to you if you get paid or if you get paid anywhere near on time. A lot of you have reacted with, no way, I would never indicate that to a client. In fact, I say the opposite, but that's not true. It's not true because when you think about it, lawyers at best bill once a month. There's nothing in today's time and billing systems that limits you to do that. This is um, a thought process that goes all the way back to batch processing or the old days of fully manual ledger-based bookkeeping, where you had to close out and get everything posted and so forth. But nowadays, in real time and billing, you could cut a check on behalf of the client and record 2 hours and put it in, and you could pull up a bill the next second that has all that in there. But the reality is we tend to wait until the end of the month when everything's closed out and we get our pre-bill and we stall on sending out the pre-bill. You might look at the amount and say, it's too small. I don't want to nickel and dime the client, which is not their perspective, but you think it is. And so maybe every 2 months or 3 months or 4 months, you may send the bill. But even if you send it every month, by the time you get around to editing it, you get it and look at it again, and then you send it off, usually with an unnecessary cover letter that delays it even further. What happens is by the time the client gets that bill and opens it, and remember that we now send fully detailed bills most of the time. So the first thing they do is they look at the detailed entries, and the dates on those entries are 45 to 60 days old because we're doing things on that at least most often monthly basis. So by the time it gets to them, those entries are 45 to 60 days old, maybe older if you're billing on frequently. And the client immediately reacts and says, oh my God, he's just billing me for work that he did 60 days ago. He surely does not need the money. And so they're going to feel that it doesn't matter how soon they pay you because you really don't need the money. If you needed the money, you would have had the bill in their hands really fast in order to turn that work around and make it money. So that's one of the ways that we tell them. Another thing that happens on the half of the client is that they get your envelope with your bill and they zip it open and they look and they go, oh, like this. Now, here's a hint, folks. You have a professional responsibility to give your client an idea of what the matter is going to cost, best case, worst case. And if anything happens, which is going to have a significant impact on that, you have a responsibility to bring them up to date and tell them what the current situation is. And a lot of times when they open your bill, if they gasp for air, that means you have not met your professional responsibility of keeping them apprised of where things are going in terms of their case. They should never be surprised when they open your bill. That's not a good sign. Last but not least, I'm going to tell you a little war story to complete this last one. Sometimes we put impediments into allowing the client to pay the bill. And here's a war story. One of the firms that I managed, I was not allowed to interfere with receivables until they got to a year old. And so there was a very good client of the firm that generated, I want to say, at least $1 million, maybe $1.5 million in revenues every year, paid all their bills absolutely on time. Most of the time, the money came out of a transaction that closed. But even if a transaction didn't close, the bill got sent for the time and expenses, and it was paid immediately. And here was one that was just skipped over, and it was in excess of $26,000. And I could not wait until it got to be a year to put my hands on it. And so the day it became a year old, I called the client. And when the client got on the phone, he just started laying into me. How dare you? I had a question on that bill and I called the attorney immediately and he was like, I'm too busy. Just take it off the bill. I don't care what you do. Just do what you think is fair. I don't have time to waste on non-billable nonsense like that. And the attorney hung up. And the client was just flabbergasted. It was an innocent couple of things that they were questioning. And so the client waited, and then another bill arrived for the next thing, and the client paid it on time. And the client called the attorney and said, listen, I've still got this other bill out there, and I haven't been able to get an answer for you. And he, just do what you want. If you don't want to pay the bill, don't pay the bill. If you just think it's worth half, send me half. I don't care. I can't spend the time doing that. I take care of your matters. I get them done as fast as I can for the best price I can. You do what you think is right. I'm not wasting time on that. And again, the call ended. So I heard all of this and I said to the client, I understand your frustration. The client said, look, I'm not trying to be a jerk about this. The attorney does great work, does it quickly, but I have a few questions and I have a right to get answers to those questions. And I'm not paying this bill until I get answers to the questions. And I agreed. So I go to the managing partner and I say, look, you're going to have to meet with this client. I'm going to bring the file out of storage. And the managing, absolutely not. And it's his client, it's his problem. I said, well, you get X% of all the revenues that come in as profit. So here's the math. This is what is at stake for you. Okay. And he said, okay, set up the meeting, bring the file in. So the file comes in and it is banker's boxes that literally go from one end of the conference table to the other. And the client comes in, and I told the client, bring your checkbook. We're going to answer your questions. So the managing partner comes in and the client starts to ask the questions. And they really were, why was this so many times? Why did we need so many copies of that? Why did we have to get this thing certified or insured or whatever it was? And the managing partner, to his absolute credit, did a yeoman's job of right there and then going through the banker's boxes, trying to find the appropriate subfolder and giving the client answers. And he really was able, to the client's satisfaction, to answer virtually everything. It turned out that the total that the client was unhappy with or questioned was about $2,500 out of over $26,000. And at this point, of course, the bill, as I had mentioned, was well over a year old. So the managing partner satisfied the client. The client takes out the check and he starts, getting ready to make it out. And the managing partner said, no, I want you to take all those questionable items, even though I've answered it for you to, 90% of your satisfaction. I want you to take the entire amount that you originally questioned off, because you were entitled to the answers. And I want to promise you that 100% of that will come out of that partner's share of the money on your matter, because he did not give you the service that you deserved. And the client was extremely appreciative of that. Now, my job, having done all this, was to stand in the door jamb as the client passed through the door to exit and just gently slide the check out of their hand. So the managing partner exits and he's waiting for the client, and the client gets to the door jamb part, and I'm kind of tugging on the check as discreetly as I can. And the client stops and he says to the managing partner, this attorney does excellent work, always did excellent work, but I was so upset that he didn't feel I deserved an answer, that it was easier for him to lose the money than to give me the service and the response that I thought I deserved as a client, that I started to use another competing firm down the street. Now imagine the managing partner was, sad, although it wasn't his client, but he said, I understand, and it's our loss, and I understand why you did it. I got the check. I was shocked. Here's what remained with me afterwards and what I need to communicate with this war story. Your definition of service is not the definition of service that your client sometimes uses. And when you fall behind in the service, your viewpoint may be indignant. So I gave that client everything. The partner certainly thought that he gave the client everything. He gave him a fabulous price and he did his deals tremendously quickly and very effectively. But yet we lost a client. We lost a client because, number one, we failed to recognize what their definition of good service was. And we lost the client because we didn't allow them to pay. How stupid is that, to not allow a client to pay? So, summing it all up, here's the bottom line. When it comes to managing our receivables, the first thing you have to acknowledge is, what are the issues that are holding you back? And what are some of the possible issues that are holding the client back from dealing with the receivable in a fast and efficient and mutually satisfactory benefit? We're going to talk some more about other aspects of receivables shortly. This has just been a little drop of wisdom about the emotional issues related to getting paid. Thank you for joining me.